everyone, I'm Hallie Andrea Alcaraz from Telum Media. Today we are speaking with Allison Jackson, the Philippines Bureau Chief of Agence France-Presse. Thank you so much, Allison, for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
All right. So you have been in the media industry for over 25 years. What inspired you to pursue journalism?
So my family always listened to the news on the radio, and every evening we would watch the television news bulletins. So I guess I was aware of current affairs from a young age, and always found it interesting. And I guess, like many journalists, you know, writing was something that I had enjoyed when I was young. So I tried out journalism by doing some work experience at a local newspaper, and I just really loved it. I just loved the variety, and that every day was different. And even now, that's something that really still really appeals to me about journalism, is just that you get to work in the morning and you just don't know what the day's going to be like. And I think as I got older, I developed an appreciation for the important role that journalism plays in holding power to account, in informing people about what's happening in their communities and beyond, um, and also just giving regular people a voice as well.
Now let's go to your work at AFP. How does a typical day at AFP's Manila Bureau look like?
The typical day sort of begins as soon as we wake up. I always check to see what's happened overnight, and just make sure that if there's anything, just check to see if there's anything that our competitors had that we should have, or if there's anything I need to respond to straight away. And then that kind of is our day. The rest of the day we're sort of doing that. We're checking, also working on stories, like features that are less time sensitive, dealing with breaking news as it happens, meeting up with contacts, monitoring various, fiber groups that government agencies use, just to make sure that we, are up to date with what's happening. Yeah, just it's that's a typical day.
All right, thanks. So please walk us through the news gathering process of AFP, particularly in the Philippines Bureau.
Okay, so I guess, whatever the story is, we want to get the facts as quickly as possible, but we don't want to sacrifice accuracy for speed. So getting the facts and getting them right is the priority always. I guess if you're talking about a breaking news story, such as like a natural disaster that's just happened, the first thing we want to do is confirm that it's actually happened. So, we often will see, and Twitter will suddenly, our tweet deck will suddenly be exploding with, tweets about, something's happened in somewhere in the Philippines. We need to verify, first of all, that it has actually happened. And then we start doing our own reporting. We'll start, calling local officials, local authorities on the ground. Meanwhile, we'll also be, looking at social media, looking for user-generated content such as photos and videos, and verifying, if when we do find that material, to verify and then get permission from the user who generated that content, to permission to use that content on our for our clients. So really, because your AFP does text, photo, and video, so these are all priorities for us. So our journalists, we're working together, but and sharing information, but trying to work as fast as we can, because obviously our clients, which include the BBC, it includes the Guardian, or local and most major media here in the Philippines, they want the information ASAP.
So, with the multitude of news happening across the Philippines and, of course, all over the world, how do you choose the topics that are worth reporting about?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess because we're an international newswire and we're writing for an international audience, so I guess the first thing we have to decide is, is this going to be interesting to an international reader or viewer? So AFP is it's like a wholesaler of news. So we provide news to other media. We don't provide news directly to consumers. So we provide, so our subscribers include, say, as I said, most of the Philippine media, and we have clients all over the world. So we're trying to provide a wide range of stories that we think will be interesting for their readers or viewers. But there's no sort of scientific sort of, it's not science when you're trying to figure that out, right? There's no sort of like formula. I often think about somebody who lives in another country, say Brazil, and I think, would that person be interested to know about this particular story, whether that's about climate change or it's got something to do with a new law that's been introduced in the Philippines, or if it's a human interest story, or and then based on that, often just decide that, okay, we should do this story. If something happens and it moves the needle on that issue, we think, okay, we should do a story because this is important development. Or something, something has a big impact on Philippine society, or it's something that's generating controversy here, or we often we'll also do a story about whatever that is.
Please describe your experience as a foreign journalist based in the Philippines. How does the Philippine media atmosphere differ from other countries you have covered before, or how is it similar?
I mean, I guess the one thing that is similar wherever I go is that it's the feeling I have, which is of enormous privilege to work as a foreign correspondent in another country. And I feel extremely grateful to be the bureau chief here in the Philippines. It's such an interesting country. There's just such an interesting range of stories to do here. I feel like we'll never run out of ideas because there's so many layers to this country. It is endlessly fascinating. And I'm aware of the dangers faced by Filipino journalists, and I have enormous respect for their dedication, because a lot of journalists here do face real threats to their safety. I feel very lucky that so far my experience has been very positive. And I feel relatively safer than I have in some of my other postings. So I used to be a correspondent in Rio de Janeiro, and I was the bureau chief in Kabul a few years ago. So those places had very particular security risks that I don't, on a day-to-day basis, I don't feel here. That's not to say that these security risks don't exist in the Philippines, anywhere in the Philippines, but I feel like my experience to now has been that it's much safer than my previous postings. But I don't want to I'm not trying to diminish the real threats that are faced by many Filipino journalists here, because they're doing really brave reporting and coming under enormous pressure, and as we've seen, sometimes they pay the ultimate price.
Thanks for sharing your experience, and I'm glad that you've had a generally good experience here in the Philippines. So, in all of your years working at AFP, can you give us examples of your best or favorite coverages you've done so far?
Okay, yeah. I mean, there's so many wonderful. I have so many wonderful memories. I think as a journalist, I'm happiest when I'm reporting. So that's like my happy place. I guess among my favorite stories. One I'll mention was in Kabul. I'm a runner. I've always loved running, and I did a story about a group of female women runners, and they took enormous risks and had overcome huge challenges to be able to run in public, which was not approved of by many people. I just want to emphasize that this was in 2018, so this is before the fall of Kabul to the Taliban. So, and it was just such a privilege to go with them. We joined them on several running sessions, and in parks and in the mountains around Kabul. And it was just, it was extraordinary. That was one story that will always stay with me. When I was in Brazil, I think a story that I really loved doing was I had the opportunity to spend 2 weeks in the Amazon with two colleagues. We we hired a 4-wheel drive and we just drove around for 2 weeks interviewing a range of people who live in the Amazon for their different perspectives on how the Amazon should be managed. And this was during the presidency of the former president, Jair Bolsonaro. So
Oh, yeah.
the atmosphere was not that friendly in some places that we went to. It was quite hostile towards journalists, particularly foreign journalists. But that was just such a, I mean, it was sort of mind blowing going to the Amazon, and it was something I never imagined I would ever get the chance to do. So, but also quite sobering to see the deforestation and just how much has been lost already. Yeah, that was really memorable. And I guess another story would be, just trying to think. I think would be when I was in China. I joined AFP in 2009 as the economics correspondent in Beijing, and I went on a trip to Inner Mongolia to do some economic related stories, and one of them was about cashmere wool. And so
Oh,
I found myself interviewing an elderly couple who raised goats, and they didn't speak Mandarin, they spoke a local dialect. And so I just remember the taxi driver happened to speak Mandarin, which was very fortunate for me. And so I was asking him, he was translating for me basically from the local dialect into Mandarin. And it was just, I mean, it was just a very funny experience. And just one of those things that my experience in China was always, often this is very difficult to plan those sorts of trips. You really can't plan them. You turn up and you just have to sort of wing it. And hope that you get lucky with, we found this, randomly found this amazing taxi driver who was just I think he thought it was quite amusing to drive two foreigners around.
so you speak fluent Mandarin?
Oh, no, not
Oh,
fluent. I mean, I used to speak okay
okay,
Mandarin back
okay,
then. No, I
all
don't want
right.
to overstate how good my Mandarin is or was. It was good enough. Let's put it
Mhm.
that way. Unfortunately, I
Okay,
think I've forgotten most of it now. So
I see. All right. Do you have any other stories that you'd like to tell
I
or share?
mean, the Philippines, we've been really lucky to do some great stories. I've been very lucky to do some, really interesting stories. I guess one of the highlights for me so far has been interviewing a family, a family who had been forced to relocate twice because of climate change. And that was in Albay province, and that was really, really interesting. And yeah, and again, I'm always surprised that how generous people are here, in terms of with their time and just with the just openness, and willingness to share their stories. Because we really, we demand a lot of people when we interview them, because we take up their time, we need their help to to show us whatever we need to see, and in order to do the story. And people are just unfailingly nice about it and very patient with us. So yeah, that's been definitely a consistent sort of feature of my reporting here, is just always been shocked, or not shocked, but just always amazed by just how nice people are.
All right. Yeah. Filipinos are also very open to journalists. They like being
Yeah.
interviewed, actually.
Yeah, and it's really, it always amazes me, like you think, wow, this person is willing to give up their time to speak to me. That's massive, and invite me into their home. That's such a privilege.
All right. So now let's go back to your work at AFP. Tell us more about your role as head of the Manila Bureau. What are your areas of responsibility?
Okay, so I mean, so I'm responsible for the operation here. So everything that is produced in the bureau by the journalists in the bureau, so photo, text, video. Ultimately, I'm overseeing that, and ultimately I'm responsible for that. I'm also coordinating daily news coverage, planning coverage for future events, and yeah, we hold sort of a daily kind of mini news conference in our bureau meeting in our office, just to talk about what's the news of the day, how we're going to cover it, what's coming up, um, and or I'm always looking for ideas from my colleagues, about more timeless stories, ideas for features, that sort of thing. And then I'm also doing my own reporting, and writing, and I'm also then editing the stories written by my colleagues. And I'm also responsible for trying to, I liaise with my colleagues in the sales and marketing of AFP, so the commercial side of AFP, to develop those relationships with our clients here, and to try and increase the AFP's profile here. So to get more people aware of who we are and what we do.
All right, thank you. So you mentioned you still do your own reporting. What stories are you focusing on?
And this goes sort of for the whole network. I mean, AFP's so we have some topics that are priority topic areas for us, like climate change and technology, and just trying to attract new audiences, like trying to appeal to do stories that will appeal to a younger audience, because obviously they're the younger consumers of news are going to be the older consumers of news, we hope one day. So we always put people at the forefront of our story. So whatever the issue is, how does it affect people? So I'm really interested in, we've done stories here about, a lot of stories about misinformation. That's another key topic for AFP, a key issue that we are always looking at. And so misinformation is a massive problem in the Philippines. It's a huge problem all over the world, but it's a particular problem here because just of the huge, heavy use of Facebook. And we saw what happened in the election campaign, how influential that can be. We've done other stories not related to misinformation, but environmental stories, such as this story we did about the climate refugees. We did a story not so long ago about the impact of deforestation in the Sierra Madre, and just how that affects the watershed and the Marikina watershed and the Upper Marikina watershed, and how that affects flooding in Manila. So again, it's how does that affect real people?
All right, thank you. So the media landscape continues to change around the world, especially with the world's adoption of AI. How does AFP cope with these changes and trends?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think change is constant, right? So technology, there seems to be always a new technology or a new trend emerging, and AFP has to adapt and has to analyze these trends, analyze this new technology, and see how, if we can incorporate it try to understand it first, because often it's a story as well as actually affecting the way we work. It's a story that we will cover for our clients. So we have to understand it. We have to see if it's something that we can incorporate into our work, but without compromising or interfering with our journalistic integrity. So on AI, I think that's something that's evolving, and GPT has sort of really shone a spotlight on the broader AI developments, and that's something that AFP is looking at very carefully at the moment. But we're already using AI in our work. If you think about the transcription apps that are now widely used by journalists, translation apps. This stuff is already in our, helping us do our job more efficiently. So I guess it's just something that we are constantly, monitoring like everybody else, really, but always cautiously, because we have to, our journalistic integrity, our ethics are really important. So we don't want that affected.
Can you share exciting projects you have in the pipeline? I know that AFP has these fact check project, right? So
Yeah.
do you have new projects, or what media strategies are you taking on to deliver more quality news to your audience or to your clients?
Yeah. Okay. So, we're always working working hard to deliver, high quality content to our clients. And you mentioned the fact check network. That is something that's really important to AFP, and we're really proud of, because we're leaders in fact checking, and we have journalists all around the world who are involved in who are working with Meta's third party fact checking program to debunk misinformation. So that's something that's really important to us. And we're also, as I mentioned before, we've got sort of certain topics that key topics or major trends in the world that are among our priorities for coverage, such as climate change. I mean, that's a huge issue, for obviously affecting everybody on the planet, and that's something that we are devoting a lot of resources to telling that story in a whole range of ways. Always, again, with like people at the forefront. How does climate change affect people? Another thing that is something that we're AFP really prioritizes is having boots on the ground. We want to report from the field, not from behind our desks. So we really like if there's that's something we are able to do because we have a huge network of bureaus around the world. So we have bureaus in more than 150 countries, and getting out and reporting from the scene of a natural disaster or where a community's been affected by, rising sea levels, or getting it actually on the ground is really key for us. And of course, we have for our clients, we have a new platform, AFP News, which we're really proud of as well. And it's a much more user-friendly platform, and it's really sort of able to showcase everything that we produce. And for our clients, it's a lot easier for them to see the range of material that we have. And also within that, we have various products or solutions such as, like ready to publish, videos, ready to publish stories, which is, again, it's helping our clients because they're also very, very busy, trying to get the news to their readers or viewers. So, yeah.
All right. Well, I just have a final question. As somebody who has been in the media industry for over 2 decades now, what advice would you give to aspiring journalists, especially in this day and age?
Oh, wow, that's a big question. My advice would be, it's hard work. It's always hard work. I started out on a very small newspaper in Sydney. This is a long time ago now, 26 years ago. And I found that invaluable as a way to learn about the craft of journalism. And it gave me the sort of experience I would never have got had I started on a big metropolitan newspaper. I eventually moved to a metropolitan newspaper, but I started off small, and I'm really glad that I did. I didn't have any contacts. I didn't come from, I didn't know anyone in Sydney. I had to just be persistent and annoying. So I rang the editor of this newspaper group every week after I'd graduated from my studies and just said, I just want to meet you. I just want to meet you. That's all. I'm not asking you for a job. I just want to meet you to show you who I am and what I think I can do. And eventually it paid off. And eventually he eventually answered, took my call and said, come in for a meeting on Friday. And I had no idea it was a job interview. I turn up and there's the editor of one of the newspapers sitting there, and I had a job. I was a sports reporter.
That's so cool. Oh, you started with sports reporting.
I started as a sports reporter, but on a local newspaper. So I was reporting, like basketball and all the various football codes in Australia, and it was such a great experience. And then I moved from that. I taught myself how to do court reporting, covering the courts, and then I became a police reporter. And it's just great experience. Things have changed enormously in the time that I've been a journalist. I started right at the beginning of the internet, where when I started, we still had libraries and newspapers, and we had librarians who would help us do the research. We used to call in our stories over the phone. So I'm a bit of a I really have seen just such a huge change in the way we do journalism. But I think there are some things that just haven't changed, and the need for persistence, the need to work hard, the need to be curious. But to get your foot in the door, I think you have to be hungry. That's what I would say. No one's just going to come and hand you a job, because there's so many other people who are also looking for that job. You have to be hungry for it. You have to be willing to work hard, but it's so worth it. It's such a great profession, and it's a real, so I highly recommend it. And again, I mean, I didn't really have a path, in the sense that I never really thought I would end up doing what I'm doing now. I could never have, if you told me that 26 years ago, I would have been just like, I would have laughed at you. So I think taking those opportunities when they come up, because you just never know where it's going to lead.
Thank you so much, Allison, for sharing your experience as a journalist and as AFP's Manila Bureau Chief. Thank you so
My
much for the
pleasure.
lessons.
My
All right.
pleasure.